Should we be teaching our kids a foreign language from the day that they start school? All of our intuition says yes, but in this video I'm going to explain why I think we shouldn't. Now look, 80% of Americans are monolingual and 60% of Brits are monolingual, and this is in spite of 5 or more years of language education from the age of 11 upwards. So this language education doesn't work, and so what we say is, well, let's start them young. Kids are like sponges, right? They soak up languages effortlessly, don't they? We should teach kids languages from the day they start school. But it is a myth to say that children learn languages fast. Have you ever watched a child grow up and watch their linguistic development over that time? It takes them years to improve. At 10 years old, after 10 years, they're only just starting to get proficient in their native language. And this is in their native language where they are constructing meaning for the first time. There's no interference from another language out there. And yes, they can become bilingual and trilingual when they are learning their native languages. And this is what seems so impressive from the outside, but that is to ignore the fact that there is nothing quick or efficient about it, and it takes them many, many years. When we start talking about learning a language at school, we're talking about a totally different thing. Now we're talking about 1 or 2 hours a week of French class on a Thursday afternoon. Have you ever seen this, and have you seen it actually work? I'm reminded of my friends who have a daughter who spent 5 years from the age of 6 to 11 taking German classes at school, a couple of hours a week, and after 5 years she couldn't put a sentence together. There are 2 reasons for that. One, there's simply not enough time. You can't learn a language in 2 hours a week in a classroom at school. And secondly, at that age, you don't have good metacognitive ability. You're not in control of your learning. And in my experience, you could simply start a child off learning a language for the first time at 11, and due to their more advanced cognition, they would be able to learn the same amount in 1 year that they were ineffectively learning for the 5 previous years. In case you're wondering who I am to speak about this, my name is Olly Richards. I speak 8 languages. I've written dozens of language learning books. I have a bilingual daughter myself, and I've taught languages around the world for many years. In fact, I wrote my dissertation on teaching young learners. And my basic point is that it is wrong to assume that learning a language younger will mean that you will learn faster. It's not easy just because you're young. So does this then mean that we shouldn't teach languages to our kids? No, it does not mean that. We want our kids to be learning languages. What it means is that we should not be extending our current woeful teaching practices to younger kids and then just subjecting them to 5 years of mind-numbing boredom, which leaves them ending up hating the language they're learning because they don't understand the present perfect. Our regular language curriculum at school does not work either. Almost 8 out of 10 kids who have studied the most popular languages at school, including French and German, say that they can do no more than understand basic phrases. It does not work. So what can we do? Well, a good starting point is to look to the kids themselves for answers. When surveyed and asked what it is they don't like about learning languages, they say very clearly, grammar and vocabulary is hard. Yeah. So I say, let's stop teaching grammar and vocabulary. Hold that thought. When those same kids are asked, well, what would actually encourage you to learn a language, they say 2 things: exchanges abroad and speaking to native speakers. What this says very clearly is that kids want to see meaning. They want to understand why it is that they are being subjected to this language learning. If we give the language meaning to them in their eyes, they will want to learn. Now, there are examples of very effective language learning in the school system. This happens in immersion schools where entire subjects like maths or science are taught in the target language.
Un hilo grueso y este va a ser un hilo.
So in this scenario, you're not studying the language as an object of study. You're studying a different subject using the language as the medium of learning. Yeah, it's hard at first, but you get very impressive results over 4 or 5 years of time and immersion. Languages aren't learned, they are acquired, which is also a big tip for adult language learners out there. And so this puts us in a strange position of knowing what's working, but not actually being able to do anything about it. Because let's be real, immersion schools are just not realistic for 99.9% of kids around the world. And so the reality is that there are huge challenges for teachers of children. They have large classes, kids who don't see the point, a lack of resources, they can't give attention to individual students. And most primary school teachers are not trained to teach languages either. Do you really think that in this context you're going to be effectively able to teach the present perfect to a 5-year-old? Teaching the language in this traditional way, grammar and vocabulary, to this age group is effectively a waste of time. So it's all very well complaining, but what are my thoughts on this? Well, my starting point is this. It's too simplistic to say that we should teach languages to 5-year-olds, because we can't even teach 15-year-olds and get good results. But all kids should get exposure to languages, and this is fundamental in order to develop empathy for other cultures, for understanding people around the world. It has to start with interest and motivation. Interest in the language, understanding why they're learning. Interest the kids in languages, then they will be motivated to learn. Try putting Japanese anime in front of a 14-year-old and just watch what happens. It's quite something. So we have to start with interest in the language. And this means a few things for me. It means free, unstructured time, not teacher teaching the classroom, but free, unstructured time, allowing kids to find resources that they personally relate to. TV, books, comics, audiobooks, games. We should be making extensive use of technology to personalize learning in that sense. Books are fantastic. Books can be read aloud by the teacher to the class or by children themselves. We can use songs to introduce music to the whole language equation. And in this scenario, the teacher can effectively disappear into the background, resist the urge to teach, and instead just facilitate and trust that if the children are immersed in the language in this way, with their interests as the guiding light, then the language ability will emerge over time. And if it doesn't, they will be interested. By the time they do get to 11 and they enter junior high school, secondary school, they now have 5 years of this warm affection for the language and a lot that's going to be in their brain already, even if they can't outwardly articulate it. So if you can find a school that can provide that kind of education for languages, then I say I am all for it, because I think that's fantastic. This does, though, for governments, mean better access to resources. It means smaller classes. It means teaching assistants to encourage personalization and individuality in learning. Absolutely no standardized tests. We need more libraries with books in them, and we need teachers who are trained in more progressive methodologies, and this is especially true in places such as Asia, where you typically have very, very old-fashioned, regimented teaching styles. So we should not be teaching languages to our kids at 5 or 6 years old, but what we should do is creating an environment where they can explore the language for themselves and fall in love with it for themselves. So by the time they get to that secondary age where they do start to learn languages more seriously at school, they're going to have such a huge advantage. They're going to want to learn, and they're going to lap up every single opportunity to actually use the language out in the real world. What's super interesting about languages, though, is what happens to the brain when you learn a language. Amazing things happen, and in this video over here, I'll show you all about it.